Hi, David. Hi, Carol. Hi, Gretchen. You are muted, David. There you go.
Is there anything new on that, what is it, Upper Artichoke Reservoir Dam? Are they just waiting to see about the money aspect of this?
Are you talking about the dam or the bridge repair?
The bridge, actually.
Bridge, you know, I haven't talked with John. Eric's been away on vacation. They've asked for this continuance again. And what they said in their request for continuance was that they're still trying to work out the details of potential new stormwater measures. And it could be that they're negotiating with West Newbury as well, and it might involve additional costs. And so.
Well,
Yeah.
I'd still like to see them just put in a pedestrian bridge. How long has it been closed now? 3 years?
It's been a while.
Wow.
And they're, you know, at least a year out, a year or more before they get this new bridge in. I don't know, is anybody squawking that it isn't there?
Some people travel to the west. Not everybody goes north to the White Mountains.
No, you got
Go
Story
around,
Avenue.
Well, I mean, can pedestrians get over it as it is now?
Yeah, they can.
Yeah.
But I'm just saying, instead of going to all the expense of building an automobile bridge.
Well, you know, Steve, it's worth writing the letter to the mayor's office and asking the question. It could be that they just actually haven't considered that
Yeah,
yet. Or it could be that we're not the ones hearing from the people who want it open. Maybe West Newbury residents or, you know.
I mean, it's just not that far over to Story Ave, 113.
To be honest, the same thought came into my head when I was out there the first time. I thought, well, why do we even need this bridge?
Well, didn't they get grants for a full bridge?
I'm sure some of it's grant money. Yeah, it must be. It's usually what pays for these things, but I don't know. Ask. So we're waiting for Dan. And Ron is not going to be here tonight. I believe he's out
Okay.
tonight.
And Paul,
That's right, he did say that.
Paul should be here though, I think.
Make sure he's not in the, who's in the participants? Let's attendees and
Julia, with the rush of all those emails that came through, I lost track of the agenda for tonight. Would you be able to send it to me again?
Sure. Well, I have the agenda right here.
Oh, there it is. Thank you.
Do you need it? Me to email it to you?
No, that's fine.
Okay.
all right, I'll give Dan another minute.
Right now, I'm going to put this slide back up just so that the initial people joining as attendees will be able to see the instructions.
Okay. All right, then we'll get this going. All right, let's bring this meeting to order. It's the May 4th, 2021 Newburyport Conservation Commission meeting taking place on the Zoom platform. This meeting's being recorded. The first item on the agenda are the April 20, 2021 meeting minutes. Does anybody have any comments or? additions, subtractions?
Julia, do you have them? Could you put it on the screen?
Sure. Yep, here they are.
I had some, yeah, under Plum Island updates. Says the DCR sediment management study was the focus of the April
Oh.
9th. It just needs to be was focused or the focus or whatever.
Okay, I'm sure Gretchen can make that change.
That was it. That's all I had.
Okay, yeah, I don't have anything.
No.
Motion to approve.
Second,
All right, let's see who's here. Steve Moore. Is that a yes? Roll
Yes.
call.
Yeah.
David Vine,
yes.
Carol Wagon,
Yes.
and I vote yes. Oh, there's Paul. Hi, Paul.
I'll vote yes too.
All right,
Whatever it
okay, to whatever it is.
was.
Yes.
I was
All
waiting
right.
for you to make the motion.
All right, next item is old and new business. I'm sure we're gonna get lots of Plum Island updates, but do we have anything non-related to our notice of intent?
No, other than that, the bags were removed. The super sack bags, the white nylon plastic-ish bags were removed last week, in case people didn't know. We had some equipment out there, some sort of light equipment, pulled them out, cleaned it up, and now it'll be ready for this upcoming project that we're going to hear more about tonight.
Okay. You all set with that, David?
Yeah, I can wait till we get to that project.
Okay. All right then, let's get going. First item is Sylvester Electric, 1163rd Street. Request for determination.
Okay, if anyone is here for 1163rd Street, you might want to raise your hand and I can promote you to a panelist. If not, we can probably handle it without any of these guys tonight. I'm not seeing anyone with their hand up, but I did communicate extensively by email with Chris Sylvester from Sylvester Electric about this revised plan, which you saw the other plan at the previous meeting, which had the generator located on the inside of the fence, sort of in this area. If you can see the hand on the cursor on the screen over on the left. And I guess since then they changed their mind and would like to have the generator placed on the outside of the fence, which is in this location here that you can see on the top left, the green box. Actually, no, I'm sorry. That's the, yeah, that's the proposed
That's the
generator.
generator.
And it's also here on the small one. So, and then I said, well, I told him if they want to do that, then they need to propose the mitigation planting area for this amount of dune grass, which they're going to be placing it on. And so that is this green area right here, which I believe we had discussed at a previous meeting, which was a good planting area for them. So now that we have the revised plan, we settled the fence issue. I don't know if there are any other comments that commissioners have on this.
Yeah, I think that's, as a generator owner myself, I think that's a much better spot. It will not be as loud as inside the sounding box of the fence.
I have a question as far as it looks like it's right on the property line. I assume that's not an issue with setbacks or anything. What I think we should make sure is that they don't, if they do put a fence in there, that it's compliant. Because it seems like it's just kind of sitting out there.
Yeah,
I mean, the fence ends before then.
Right, like it's sort of vulnerable and you think they might want to put a fence around it eventually? Is that what you're suggesting?
Or complete the fence that they have going forward. And
Right.
somehow shielding it a bit, but I guess as shown, everything is fine. It's just
Well-
maybe.
Yeah, well, then if everything's fine the way it's shown, why don't we could put on a condition that any addition of fences or enclosures will require them to come back to us.
I guess I have a concern about the vegetation being planted. Clearly, the electrician's not going to do it. The owners seem to be somewhat hands-off. Do we have, this is an RDA, so I guess we need to put a
Yeah.
condition on that the plantings will be done in some certain amount of time.
I think that's a great idea. I think we should put a time limit on it, like before, concurrent with installation of the generator, so that when the generator's in, the plantings have to also be in, potentially. And there's no reason why they can't put that in now.
Okay. So
And they should probably notify you, Julie, of the
Yes.
plantings.
Yeah.
Must be approved by the species and locations must be approved by the conservation administrator.
Okay. I'll say notice to administrator of installation of plantings and names of species shall be provided.
Did they say how many square feet they're gonna plant?
Yeah, it's only 8 square feet.
Okay, but as we discussed before, the generator is gonna kill a bunch of grass next to it, next to the exhaust. So it's gonna be at least
you
a
want it-
couple of square feet.
Do you want to make it that it has to be a minimum of 10 to 12 square feet or something like that?
Yes.
Okay. Okay, and they have to be native species and only beach grade sand used for.
So I'm looking at the bottom of this thing. It says dated March 1st. Do we need something dated more recently? Or is this good enough?
Well, this is an RDA. What I can do is I can stamp this plan as the final plan with and put a date on it and put it in the file.
Okay.
We have anything else?
Nope.
No. Got a motion?
Motion to issue a -3 determination.
Second,
Roll call, Paul Haley,
Yes.
Steve Moore,
yes.
Dan Warshall,
Yes.
David Vine,
Yes,
Carol Wagon,
Yes.
and I vote yes. All right. Hi, Dan.
Hi, Joe.
All right, next item is Jordy Vining, Clipper City Rail Trail, request for minor modification.
Okay. All right, Lucas Taylor, I'm going to promote to panelist. I'm assuming you're here for this item. And is there anyone else would like to present on this? Please raise your hand now and I will promote you also to panelist. Is Jordy here?
I don't see him.
Hello.
Hi, Lucas.
Yeah, I wasn't sure if Jordy was going to be able to make it. I
Okay.
know he mentioned possibly Chris Pratt of the wastewater treatment facility, but I'm not
Yeah,
sure if he's
yes.
on right now either.
I don't see him either. So anyway, if anyone else shows up and would like to speak on this, they can raise their hand and I'll move them over as well. Okay. So let me get to this application here for this minor modification to the Clipper City Rail Trail plans. All right.
All right. Hello, everyone. My name is Luke Taylor. I'm with GZA, Geo-Environmental. It's an engineering consulting firm. I'm assisting the city of Newburyport on this shoreline resiliency, critical infrastructure protection, and Clipper City Rail Trail project. The construction is ongoing currently. It's the rail trail portion that extends in fronting Water Street up to the intersection of American Yacht Club. And today we are requesting a minor mod to add or construct some hot mix asphalt from the existing driveway at the wastewater treatment plant facility up to the intersection of the existing rail trail and the constructing rail trail that's currently under construction right now, which is in front of the American Yacht Club. So generally, the overall project that's currently under construction is a sloped stone revetment. I'm sure many of you are familiar with it, along with a raised berm and a recreational trail that's paved on top. And the city wishes to propose this new hot mix asphalt to connect existing asphalt driveway to the intersection, mainly to provide a smoother and safer transition, as well as to reduce any gravel or existing mud tracking onto the recreational trail, which could pose a hazard to any users. And ideally, this paved trail would provide a more stable, less erosion, and just less tracking or mud throughout, which currently can exist because it's just a gravel driveway. Let's see, just some minor details of this proposed work. The hot mix asphalt is proposed to be pitched towards the northwesterly, which is shown kind of in these arrows in this drawing. And that's generally the flow path of the stormwater flow that's proposed. And that generally will follow to a low area, yep, right where your cursor is, which is a gravel and grassed area that currently exists and is generally the low spot around this area in the infiltration. Yep. So the west side of this proposed asphalt would remain as existing gravel to, one, help with pre-treatment of any stormwater runoff and to help with any infiltration. And then the easterly side of the asphalt, there is an existing grassed area with trees, and the city proposes to enhance this area by putting some new loam and seed to help with the grass growth and to remove and reinstall the last tree on the, yep, keep going, yep, that last tree appears to have been kind of run over in the root zone by some delivery trucks throughout the trail construction progress and some miscellaneous work that's happened in that corridor area. And so the city would propose to replace that and add new loam and seed to help restore this grassed area. So overall, the entire width of the grassed area between the existing concrete walkway and the proposed asphalt driveway, this whole area would be approximately 13 feet, 12 to 13 feet. Then the proposed asphalt driveway would be 15 feet wide, followed by an existing gravel, which would remain, which is approximately 7 feet wide, leading up to an existing curb line. I think that's generally all I have. I don't know if you guys have any questions or
I have a
comments.
question, Lucas, is, can you show us on the map, are they gonna also pave where the trail goes over into the Joppa Flats Park there? Will that also be paved or will that stay grass?
I'm not sure I follow.
It looks to me like you're just talking about the area by the treatment plant and the driveway, right?
Yep.
On the other end of the trail where it hooks up to the Joppa Flats Park there,
Mhm.
is that going to be paved also?
So as part of the rail trail itself is a 10-foot wide paved recreational trail that leads up to the existing walkway adjacent to Water Street and that Joppa walkway. I don't know if that's what you're talking about.
Julie,
Yeah,
can you bring up
it-
the?
It will
photos?
be, yeah, it will be paved. This is where we're talking about right here. This is the gravel, existing gravel drive. This is the pavement that when you come into the wastewater treatment plant, you come in on pavement and then you've got this gravel stretch before you
Right.
get to the rail trail ahead of you running parallel to the shoreline. So this is the stretch that they're going to pave. I think what Carol's referring to is over by Joppa. The
Yes,
rail trail was still, that area that is to be the rail trail has been still grass. And that's because they had to delay that part of the project because there was contamination along that stretch of waterfront behind the wastewater treatment plant. I believe they've actually just paved it now. If you were to go out there today, you might see that that stretch that connects with Joppa is now paved.
okay, that was my question. Thank you, Julia.
Sure.
Thank you, Julia.
Yeah, no problem.
So just out of curiosity, the parking lot there for the American Yacht Club, is that gravel or is it paved?
This over here is paved.
No, I mean, straight ahead, the American,
Oh,
inside
right ahead.
the yacht club's fence.
Yeah, I believe it's paved.
So I think inside it's gravel, but there's a small asphalt strip right there at the intersection of the recreational trail.
So that could cause the same problem we're trying to fix here. With tracking dirt onto the pavement. I mean, there's nothing you can do about it. I was just curious.
Well, it'll lessen it at least.
Is this the only change from all the work along that area where the revetment is being placed?
Yeah, that one is following the plans. This was the only minor modification.
Okay, and
Well, there have been other minor, this is one of a series of minor modifications, but yeah, the only one that you're addressing to.
we're up to
tonight.
date and everything else was built according to plan. When do you anticipate that this work will be done and that the trail will be open?
I think the goal is the end of June.
Okay.
Good.
Jordy can host a party.
Exactly. Restrictions will be off. All right, do we have anything else?
Motion to approve the minor request for minor modification.
Second,
Second,
All right, roll call, Paul Healy,
yes.
Steve Moore,
yes.
Dan Warshall,
Yes.
David Vine,
Yes.
Carol Wagon,
Yes,
and I vote yes. All right, thank you, Lucas.
Thank you all.
Thanks, Lucas.
Thank you.
All righty. The next item is Port Place Development, Tom Hughes, Environmental, Evergreens Commons, Port Place, request for minor modification, request for extension. So we got a lot of comments from the homeowners association on soil conditions and such. I did communicate with Tara, whose last name is escaping me. And she said that they would be happy with not commenting tonight and getting some written responses from Port Place folks, which I would like to see too. But also, we can discuss those issues further at a subsequent meeting. So tonight we'll just we'll focus on the minor modification request and the request for extension.
Okay, thank you. Good evening. Tom Hughes with Hughes Environmental Consulting. With me tonight is Chip Hall from Evergreen Commons LLC, Lisa Mead, and Steve Sawyer. What I'd like to do is walk through the minor revision. When I get to the engineering part, I'll turn it over to Steve Sawyer, and then there's part that involves a change to the HOA agreement. And for that, I'll refer it over to Lisa Mead and Steve Sawyer to discuss that. So if we can zoom in on that plan a little bit, I'm going to walk through the changes that are in the open space. One is the removal of a bridge crossing. You may recall, we showed originally the bridge crossings that go to the island and over, and we showed one where there used to be a golf cart bridge at kind of that pinch point right there. And we realized fairly early on in a meeting with some folks from the city that when you stand out there, it kind of was going to be a little too much in terms of impact to the wetland for the value of having another bridge crossing. It's actually a nice loop size to do a loop with the path as is with the island, and we didn't want to overdo it with bridges. So that's one change. In the area where the entrance to that bridge was going to be, there were some plantings. Some of them have not been installed. What we'd like to do is shift the ones that have not been installed over to the entrance to the island bridge, because the idea of those plants was kind of to welcome you up to the bridge. And so we want to make a slight shift with those as well. The other thing that we've done is around that bridge, there were two circular areas of a different seed mix and not the pollinator mix. And given that we're no longer going to have the bridge there, what we've done is we've trimmed that seed mix at the trail so that on the other side of the trail, we go into the pollinator mix. And on the other side, we go into a new meadow type that I'll go over in a second. But the idea is, long-term as a homeowners association is maintaining the open space and doing the mowing protocol that we've laid out. It's going to be difficult for them to, follow that tiny little curved line that used to be there and just have a small area of a different seed mix for different maintenance. So we wanted to make that pollinator meadow sort of easier to maintain. So you don't, somebody just follows the path basically to maintain the pollinator meadow in that area. That's just right there. And if you look at that tan area of the other seed mix, you can see it's like in a circular form. So it used to come out in an arc. So we just basically got rid of that arc. The next thing is on the other side, on the west side of the trail, on the other side of the IVW. Given the proximity to the tree line and the fact that we're getting a bunch of native understory essentially starting to come in, we've decided to change that area as well as an area that is further to the south that kind of goes up the hill. And we had a great site visit with the commission last week. Chip Hall and I walked around the site with several members of the commission and with Julia. And one of the areas we walked up was that slope. It's sort of a grassy slope south of the stormwater wetland. So what we would do is turn those into what we're calling a transitional meadow. So within the meadow area, there'll be a bunch of shrubs and saplings that will be installed. And I've got some plans, a couple sheets down, I'll show you that. But while we're on this, we also had to make a change. If we can go back up to the north, we made a change to, for accessibility reasons, to the path coming down right up across from Unit 25. We used to come down the slope with kind of a Y trail that would split going sort of northwest and southeast. But instead, in order to get an accessible slope, we've changed the orientation of that to run kind of along a slope line, more or less. And if there's any questions in particular about the engineering on that, Steve Sawyer could answer those questions in a little bit.
Before you,
Yeah.
if we go back down to the south for that,
Yes.
the hillside,
Yeah.
I guess they were sliding on that hillside during the winter.
Yeah, there was
So
some.
do you really want to put trees and shrubs in it?
Well, in a second, I'm going to go to the next sheet and I'll show you what we've done. And while you're looking at this, you see where the stormwater wetland is. I mean, what we want to do is try to encourage some sledding off to on the western side, so they end up kind of down where the path is, and not on the eastern side where they could, if they really got going, end up into the stormwater wetland. So I'll show you how we thought that through. And the last item was there had been some ponding that was lasting for a while in the area of the tot lot. So so a small perimeter drain was put in around the tot lot, and it was run into the water feature side, just a 4-inch drain, and that has improved the ability of that area to dry up. So now if we can go to the next sheet. Okay, so all right, let's see, where does this one? Oh, I'm sorry. So the other change was the street trees were, there's a native pick list, and this sheet here shows you, if you were to zoom down onto the street trees, like around the parade ground there, you'll see that there are handwritten letters in there, and next to the trees on the plant list is a key. And what happened is the landscape contractor installed different trees in different places, but they are still from the native list that was approved. So all of the trees that were installed as street trees are still from the approved list. They're just different trees in different places, which, you know, from a conservation point of view, really has no effect on anything. If we can go to the next sheet. Okay, so this is a plan done up for that transitional meadow area, and this is the area on the hill. And if you can see, there's some arrows drawn in on that. I don't know if you can zoom in on the hill area there, Julia.
Yep, hold on.
Yep. So what we did is we tried to leave an open area for sledding in between sort of clusters of shrubs and saplings. So there's still enough room there. You know, that's a good, 20 feet wide anyway, for and probably a little wider for people to go up and sled down. And we're happy to make it opener. If the commission wants it to remain a little more open, we're happy to do that. We just don't think with the shade up there, we don't think we're going to be able to get a decent pollinator meadow established. And we thought doing this transitional meadow idea would both preserve some sledding area, but also add habitat value. And we did include some white pine. So over time, it'll also improve the number of trees between the highway and the development in that area. So, so does that answer your question about the sledding, Steve?
Yeah.
Okay.
But it brings up another question. If we end up perhaps putting a pathway there to access the other path,
well, in the winter, the
Yeah.
pathway is probably not going to be clear, right?
No, I was just thinking like your shrubs that are up at the very southern end there, that's where we talked about.
Yeah, they're not that tight. Certainly, we could weave through there with, there's just going to be clusters, so we could weave around it, and we can, and we can field place them to make sure that if there was sort of that one spot, if we were to go that route when we walked up, where it would make sense for a set of stairs or whatever. And in that area, we could just not block it.
Okay.
Yeah. But actually that sledding path area would probably help along those lines. I think the next changes have to do with the stormwater system. So what I'd like to do is, actually, if you can just, on the next one, click on the maintenance thing. If you look at the note at the very bottom, what we did is the pollinator meadow coloring is also the same as the transitional meadow coloring. So that maintenance goes under the same column. And we put a note that the transitional meadow area is that. And then also in all areas, one thing that wasn't clear in our mowing plan is you mow around the shrubs and trees that get planted. We just realized that we want to be explicit on that, because once we turn over control, we don't want you guys getting a call that somebody went out with a brush hog and went over all the stuff we put in. So that's what that is. And then if we can go to the next sheet, and then I'll turn it over to Steve to talk about the engineering changes that, I'm sorry, the one after that. Yep. So Steve can talk about the changes to the rain gardens and some of the other engineering features that were done. Steve?
Good evening, Steve Sawyer, with Design Consulting. Really, the major changes for here is for all of the rain gardens, we provided an orifice outlet. As we're running along, rain garden, I guess, rain garden A, or actually I think it's B. So the one down south of Gabourey, that one always had an outlet pipe. So there was no changes to that. As we work around, we go to rain garden C, which is the next rain garden just north of Gabourey. We installed a outlet orifice, basically a standpipe where the water would flow into the standpipe, and then it would drain. It would drain directly into the water feature. Originally, my thought was we had a berm overflow, and it would just run over, sheet flow overland. We were having issues just with rivulets and washing out the path and such, and general erosion issues. So to mitigate that, we provided a pipe outlet to the water feature. It doesn't change anything regarding the treatment. It's just a different manner of discharge, controlled, with the orifice, standpipe orifice and piping. I ran these all by John Eric White when we were proposing. He thought it was a good idea. Same thing to the next rain garden C. We had issues with that. That one sees a fair amount of overflow. That one sees a fair amount of overflow, and that berm, we had issues with that berm between the water feature and the rain garden. There was some pretty good erosion happening during events, and we were having trouble to get established vegetation to stabilize things. So same thing, we put in the overflow orifice, the standpipe with a piped outlet. And then as we work our way north, the same thing. BCD, rain garden D, same thing, an orifice. We had erosion issue. Basically the water, we were having issues stabilizing with the erosion. So we just provided standpipes with an outlet pipe for all of these, all the rain gardens. As I said, no change to water treatment or the operation. It's just in the manner how the water is discharged from the rain gardens. And then the furthest one north, rain garden E, discharges to the vegetated, the constructed vegetated wetland area. If we can pan up a little more.
I think this is the top of the.
Oh, you got to go to the next sheet. Yep. Yeah.
Oh,
hit the
okay,
next sheet.
sorry.
There we go. Yeah, there
Here we
were two
go.
sheets. Yeah, drop to the next sheet. Yep.
All right.
There we go.
So this one.
Yeah. So you can see that there's a standpipe, and then the pipe discharges right next to where the bridge is for rain garden E. All the outlets are stabilized with riprap. So to date, we don't have any erosion issues. Everything's stabilized now, as far as with the outlets of these, and no further issues. So that's been approved. So the other change was over on the east side, plan east side, right side of the site. We originally had as between sort of running behind lots 26, 27, 28, 29, and down to 30. I think we had three dry wells back there in the open space where the water would pour into the dry well and directly into the groundwater. And then there was an overflow pipe. There would be a pipe underground that would connect them all to the 8-inch drain between lots 26 and 27 that would ultimately, during larger events, would direct the water across the street and eventually into rain garden E. John Eric White, when in discussions with him, he actually requested this change, said, can you please get rid of those? He said, I really don't like the idea of surface water, or the surface water basically discharging directly into the ground, into the ground, and hence into the groundwater, where this is the closest edge, basically the closest edge to the well. He asked if there's a way to kind of just create a subtle swale, direct it towards the 8-inch pipe, and then into the rain garden, then across, basically eventually across the street and across into the vegetated wetland. So basically directed away from the well, which we agreed. We thought that, it's funny, no one Granted, it was a lawn area that it was really considered clean, but he said, yeah, he said, who knows what happens in the lawns? He said, it would just be nice to do that. So we ended up changing that and removing those 3 dry wells and then directing the water into a swale. That area that's in red is basically a stone trench with a perforated pipe that actually picks up the water. It's so flat, picks the water up and directs it to the basin at the 8-inch drain there, and then it's conveyed over across the street, and then eventually through the particle separator into the rain garden, and then into the vegetated wetland. So that's the other change. Then the final change that we had a flat area. This site, as everyone knows, it's very flat, extremely flat area. So if we go to the south, you may have to go to the other sheet, maybe that first sheet. If you go up,
Okay, yep,
yeah, one sheet up. So that first sheet we were looking at.
okay.
There we go. Nope. Yeah, that's it. So if you pan a bit to the right.
Yep.
So between Boyd Drive, between Boyd Drive and Duffy, behind lots 5, 6, and 7. I don't know if we can zoom into that area in between. Yeah. So I had called out for a very flat area. It's very flat. It was about 0.5%. You know, it was a very subtle, everything graded from the backyard to the property line, and then around basically behind lots 5, 6, and 7 to the rain garden. Very hard to control the grading there. There was some low spots, and particularly around lot 5. There was some ponding occurring. The homeowner asked if Chip if there's something he could do. He said, yeah, we can mitigate that. So we regraded that area, placed a dry well, and then basically we piped from that area, piped all the way over to rain garden B. And then at the angle point and along that area where it was flat, we put in a couple of area drains. So that was just to mitigate some standing water at that location. Once again, it's just lawn water and some of the back roof areas that gets directed to the rain garden. So it doesn't change anything as far as the intent and the water quality and the treatment. It was just we were running into some issues with some drainage in that area. So those features were added. So I think that's it. That wraps up all the drainage changes proposed.
Steve, do those are those rain gardens? Is there going to be enough capacity to for those to hold that extra runoff, or if there is any extra with those features?
Yeah, they're fine. So it really the capacity is the outlet. The rain gardens themselves aren't there to mitigate any mitigate peak rate or such. It's solely for water quality volume. So basically the water quality volume is it's calculated by the driveway and roadway area. So the water in the rear, there's really no pollutants involved with it. So as far as the intent or the design intent of the rain gardens, it doesn't impact that. Doesn't impact the rain garden there. And our outlet has the capacity to convey the water out, out of the basin.
Okay.
Yeah.
Question on these drawings. Do these drawings reflect the additions such as swimming pools and retaining walls that have since been added?
David, that's a great segue. Before we answer that, though, this is Lisa Mead on behalf of Evergreen Commons LLC. If it's okay, David, before we answer that, because we're going to go into that discussion next related to the impervious. Does the chair want to answer any other questions related to the changes for this part of it? Because David's question actually can be answered in the next segment.
Do we have anything else in the previous parts?
I was just wondering, when we were out there for the site walk, we were discussing how the water table was low and given the drought situation, I was just curious, Tom, how do you feel, are those rain gardens, do they appear to be functioning as you'd like to see them, with the growth?
Yeah. So And forgive me, Steve was calling them rain gardens like A through E. I call them B through F because feature A is actually the stormwater wetland. But so rain garden B, which is the big one Steve was just talking about, that drain going into, that one doesn't hold water for longer than say 24 to 36 hours. It seems to infiltrate really nicely. And one thing that's kind of cool about that rain garden is all the water that leaves that goes through a pipe and gets retreated again in the big stormwater wetland with the city's stormwater from Boyd, right, Steve? Is that?
Yes, that's correct.
So the other thing is, and the other rain gardens are drying out very quickly. The one rain garden F probably holds water about the longest, but that tends to be about 24 to 36 hours based on my observations after a decent storm. They all seem to be working really nicely. We do have a few plants to replace in a couple of them. And they're about due for some maintenance with the mulch, but I mean, I'm really happy with what I'm seeing, especially after these engineering changes, with how they're working and fitting in. And in fact, right after a rainstorm, you can see ducks swimming around in rain garden F, and then they go down to the isolated wetland as it dries out. But no, I mean, I think overall it seems like the system is really working well, and I have yet to see any turbid water leaving the stormwater wetland and going into the isolated wetland, which is a great sign. It means that, that big area of water that some is coming from the site and the rest is coming from Boyd Drive is really being cleaned very well before it ever enters our IVW. So hopefully that answered your question.
Yeah, thank you. Appreciate it.
All right. Anything else on this section? All right, go ahead, Lisa.
Thank you. So David, I'm going to let Steve answer your question, but I'm going to set it up a little bit because over the last 2 years, I think that the issue related to impervious area on the lots and how that's calculated and what happens at the time that the occupancy permit is issued and how that's calculated and how the city keeps track of it, Jennifer and Julia, moving forward has been a cause for us all to get to know each other really well over the last 2 years. And so based upon a lot of work that Steve did, we came up with a methodology that I think after we met with Jennifer and Julia is going to work for everybody. So you might recall, and this is one of our requests for minor modifications, and then we would have to go to the planning board to have it finally authorized, is that in the homeowners association document, both the Conservation Commission and the planning board required a provision that the lot, the impervious area on each individual lot could not increase by more than 5% over the conditions of the lot. And then there were some lots because of the 3-car garages that was reduced to 2%. And so that conditions of the lot was difficult to determine what that meant. And what everybody meant at the time was 5% of the size of the lot, because we knew exactly what the size of the lot was. And so what we have done, so we're asking for a modification to the HOA to change the language to be 5% over the size of the lot, as opposed to conditions of the lot. And I provided this language to you, or 2% over the size of the lot, as opposed to the conditions of the lot. And the reason that is that what we will do, and if you could go down, Julia, to 9, I think. Right. So what Steve has done is he has created and done calculations, and I'm going to let him get into the details of it. We're essentially at the issuance of the occupancy permit, and now obviously that has happened on a number of units, and so we've already started to create these plans that will have to be finalized. The city is going to get a sheet, which we'll show you in a minute, that shows the exact impervious area on the lot at the time of the issuance of the occupancy permit. And then we'll also provide the calculation so that when somebody comes in later to do something else to their property, because these are all individually owned, the city will have in the file exactly what can be done and what the dates and calculations are. And so Steve, if you want to talk about how you ran the calculations to make sure that that number is a conservative number and how it meets the requirements of both the permit from the order of conditions as well as the planning board, I'm going to let you take it away.
Okay. Good evening. So David, I think, so what your question regarding, yes, the buildings, driveways, walkways, patios were all shown in that plan, but as far as walls and fences and such, I don't believe that the actual fence line was shown on that plan or on this plan. The intent of this as-built surfaces plan is just, okay, what do we have for paving, building, patios and such. So this plan was generated, every channel went out and, basically all the driveways, buildings, patios, surveyed the lots. So I've generated a table showing roof area, patio area, driveway, road and sidewalks, and then lawn landscape or permeable patios. I think if you recall, I think on lot 21 with the pool, that constructed pool, that entire lot the entire patio is all permeable paver, very actually well constructed permeable paver. So that's considered a permeable surface. So we're not, that's not included in the, it's included in the landscape area. So from Everett's information, I plotted this plan up. This is this is basically a running total. There's still some lots under construction. And I think it was pointed, I think one of the butters might have pointed out, we missed a couple patios. When I went back into the survey, Everett had the points, but there were no lines. So I missed that. I missed the patios there, but this is basically a draft or a progress print, I call it. And I think you recall when we had that meeting, I think over the winter was okay. The overall site conditions we are over our impervious areas is above what was permitted. I think it was like 35,000 square feet, somewhere in the neighborhood of that. And even with the additional 35,000 square feet and if we added a full 5% of each lot, with the added impervious area, the ILSF would only go up by 3/4 of an inch, which is insignificant, particularly where we're at 2.5 or 2.25 feet. The basements are all set 2.25 feet above that highest ground or highest ILSF elevation. So this additional impervious area is really inconsequential as regarding any of the safety of the homes and the elevation of the ILSF. So, at this point, it's, we have a running total, and our plan is if we go to the next, drop down to the next, I did a sample of what we'll submit for each lot. So each lot will have a as-built site conditions plan showing the lot number, total lot area, house, and each of the surfaces appropriate for each lot. So there'll be 80 of these plot plans submitted. We can actually start at this point. We can start, if this form is okay, we can start submitting the complete houses that are occupied, the COCs have been issued with, start submitting them to the planning board. And I guess if the conservation would like them, they could hold them also, putting that package together. I think we should definitely do one last plan in hand, site check to make sure we have everything. Just make sure we have all of the areas. I think, I think one of the plans I think a couple we might have missed the bulkhead. We're going to make sure we get the bulkheads in there and such. But as far as those small areas that we may have missed, I think to date, it might accumulate to maybe 1,000 feet. I don't know, maybe if that, I'd be surprised of what might not be shown on this plan. And then what we indicated on the plans for the buildings that were under construction, the lots were under construction, I think we hadn't assumed, we basically, okay, here's the average. So that's how I came up with the projected square footage of, the additional impervious overage. But I'm very confident that, as far as this additional impervious area has no impact or danger to the homes as far as the impact of the ILSF elevation on the property.
So So Julia, and as to the form, so just so you know, right now, when an order, occupancy permit is issued, in addition to the photograph of the plaque in the garage, there is an as-built provided, but it doesn't provide as much detail yet. So this would then be added to that. And Julia and Jennifer both thought, and Julia, you can certainly speak for yourself, that this information was going to be incredibly helpful in addition to the running tab that would be provided, which would be able to provide a closeout on the overall plan set as well. And so as part of the minor modification this evening, we're asking that you approve that change in the HOA so that we can go to the planning board and get it finally approved. And then we would actually make that change so that everybody would be clear about exactly what it means. And then my last request would be the issuance of the extension that we had requested. So because of the COVID, because of the governor's COVID orders, the extensions are automatically granted. And so our request, so that we would have a date, because we basically have to go 333 days beyond the date the emergency is lifted, which, you know, God willing, it's going to happen soon. But we did a calculation. So we would have 333 days as of the date we filed this. So it would be February 6, 2024. That gets us through the remainder of this work and the replanting and planting that we would have to do to make sure that we get through 2 life cycles and still have our order of conditions, so that by the time we come back in for but by the time it expires, we would have our 2 years of growing and be able to close it out.
Getting back to the question I had, so you're going to have a as-built for each one, and from the site visit we had, what we noticed was some fences were not within where the bounds are. We noticed, the additional retaining walls and so forth. Where are those going to be shown?
So can I just address the fences issue for a minute? So David, as you know, we're also in the middle of getting the conservation restriction approved, which requires that nothing be built within the conservation area. So the 4 properties that had encroachments have all gotten notices from us that they've had encroachments, and they are in the middle of removing those encroachments from the conservation open space area. In fact, I got a call today, one of them has completed that work. So as far as the encroachments, those are going to be gone, and those bounds will be set where those encroachments are. I think as of today, almost all the bounds have been set. And then Steve, you can talk about showing the other impervious area.
So as far as, I guess, as far as a retaining wall, that'd be a very small, it's just, I think the only retaining walls are just those Versalok, which are about an 8-inch deep wall. Those can be, I'm not sure, I have to check if Everett has those located. I know he must have located one of them. There was some encroachment, so I don't know if he located the entire wall, but those can be added. We can add those to the plan, and then we'd show them in each site plan.
Okay, so you're going to show that, you're going to show the fences in relation to the bounds, and you'll be showing any changes that occurred, like swimming pools and so forth.
Yes.
On the site plan.
Yeah.
And as far as them doing such things, they're all getting building permits when they're doing this?
I know for the pools they are. There's one pool that was constructed, and then there's one currently under construction. So they have to go in for building permits. Yes, for that.
Yeah, they've been getting building permits for those things, David. But for things like retaining walls and other landscape features, they don't need the building permit. So I'm not sure how that works.
I guess I'm concerned that they're built in the proper place as far as the retaining walls. And I know they're not particularly high retaining walls, but I mean, they are structures that were constructed out there.
Well, the lots all have, I mean, David, to your point, it would be like anybody else, right? So the lots all have bounds. That's one up from most other places, right? So they all have bounds to the open space. And they're all given as-built at the issuance of the certificates of occupancy. So, you know,
So the mechanism is what? They someone decides they want to put a retaining wall in, someone decides they want to put a pool in. What's the mechanism?
well, you got to get a building permit for a pool. And depending on the retaining wall, you may or may not have to get a building permit.
Is
Okay,
a
and-
retaining wall something, Lisa, that would have to go before the homeowners association? Are there changes to landscaping? Is that something that needs to get approved by the association?
I don't, not on your individual lot, Julia. I don't
I'm just
believe.
wondering, like, if it changes drainage patterns out there, you know, I mean, given that this is a wet site, it seems like if someone put up a retaining wall or elevated their property in the backyard, that might change the water flow onto someone
Well,
else's
certainly if they
property.
elevated their property, right, they would be subject to, you know, if they're jurisdictional, they would be subject to your jurisdiction.
Well,
And
if
we-
an individual lot isn't within our jurisdiction after this,
Well,
you
right,
know,
but right
permit
now they
closes
are,
out.
right? We have.
Yeah, no, I'm talking about like right now that it's a different situation and we're looking at everything and we're going to go through every lot at the end
Right.
for a certificate of compliance. But afterwards, these types of changes, I think that's what David was getting at. No, correct me if
No,
I'm
I
wrong,
don't-
David.
No, I
Yeah.
mean, you know,
Yeah,
Yeah.
actually, you know, because of the topography, really is the ones that would want a wall basically are the ones that the walkouts, I guess, the ones that back up to the rain gardens and such, and particularly the ones that if we want to put a pool in, you'd want a level area for your pool. So hence that's why the walls went in for that project, and that one required a building permit. And I guess as far as any impacts to drainage, it would be, you know, if you lift the land at your lot, you know, basically you'd be impacting yourself if they flattened out their lot on their own, you know, in their property. I don't see how in the overall grand scheme of the drainage patterns here, it'd be pretty difficult or have to be a fairly substantial wall and encompassing many lots to change any of the drainage patterns.
Right, because it's no longer draining away from your property as it was before, right? Or-
Yeah, everything here, kind of the front yard's drained to the street, the backyard's drained to, you know, kind of basically grade away from the building. And that's pretty consistent throughout the whole, you know, the whole project. We had to lift, you know, you lift up the house, that the basements were lifted up to keep them well above the flood and well above the LSF, kind of lifted the foundations up, and then we grade away.
Julia, I have been corrected. If you're going to modify your landscaping, you have to submit the plan to the HOA.
That's what I thought. Yeah, okay, that makes sense. Because it would affect their landscaping contracts and things like that.
Right. Yep.
With regard to the 3-year extension, Lisa, the need for it, well, you can make the case for the 3-year, but the certificate of compliance is not going to be relevant because a complete certificate of compliance has to be applied for before the last occupancy permit is issued for the last house. So that's going to be coming relatively soon, like in the
Yeah,
fall.
Yeah, I misspoke. What I meant was you have to come back. We all have a continuing condition, right? That the vegetation, you know, what do we have? 75 or 80% after 2 years, right? So you're going to be we're going to, you know, we might have to replant things in that time period. You're going to want to come out. That's my point. I misspoke about the certificate of compliance. I meant the continuing condition.
Right.
Yeah, for me at this point, you know, if the governor ended the emergency declaration, you'd still have 13 months left on your order conditions, and right now I don't see a great need for extending it for 3 years. You know, in a year you can come back and show us what's going on and what's left and what's died and what needs to be replaced and everything. I'm not going to vote for an extension right now. I don't know how the rest of the commission feels about that, but
yeah, I just don't think it's needed at this time. You know, if you know you have at least 13 months left to run, if it gets closer to that new end date and you do need more time, then it'd be certainly fair to come in and ask for an extension at that point.
All right, so we'll just keep track of when the governor's, order ends,
Yeah.
and we'll do the calculation, and we'll send you a letter that says governor's order ended, and, we've got 395 days.
Yeah.
That's fine.
I just have one question on the plot that's up on our screens. Says the potential additional impervious is 537 square feet. Is that correct?
Yeah.
What is the average square footage of a swimming pool? Let's say that if somebody wanted to add one.
Well, 20, what is it, 16 by 32 or 18 by 34? It's 612, so it's like, they'd have to make a smaller pool, I guess. I guess the question is, so are we considering the pools to be impervious? Was that a
Yes.
decision?
The
Yes.
pools are impervious, yes.
All right.
That's part of the HOA. And that's, Steve, that was all that discussion that we had originally, you
Yeah.
might recall,
Yeah.
during this doc. We haven't changed that. The pool would be
Yeah.
impervious, and
Yeah.
that, everybody knew that. The HOA is on record. Everybody knows that.
Yeah, 30, this lot's one of the smaller lots, so unfortunately they're pinched in a bit. And there's things they could do. They could, I would think that if they wanted to gain more impervious or great, they could swap out impermeable. They could either make a permeable driveway, but rip out their patio. And that's what one homeowner did. He basically took out a impermeable patio and built the entire patio to be permeable. So he swapped out some impermeable surface to make that happen.
Yeah, there are ways you can get creative, but it is really helpful, as Lisa said, that we now have this spreadsheet, which shows all of the impermeable surfaces and what's been used and what will be allowed. It's going to be really helpful into the future. So we do appreciate that.
Yeah, and speaking about ripping out stuff, and when we were on the site visit out behind on the city property, we found a pile of sod that clearly came from one of the houses there. And I have concerns about that semicircle area that's wide open now, how that's going to be once it gets transferred to the city, how, it's just a big flat area, how that's going to get affected. And frankly, I would like to see a split rail fence get put along that boundary, because we don't need damage happening in that area. And it was, I think we had discussed something like that previously, but now that I see that homeowners are doing some dumping out there, I think we need to have something there to prevent that in the future.
Mr. Chair, I'd say a couple of things. So first of all, that area is separated by the backs of the yards, which all have boundaries, markers, and then open space. And then there's the area for the city. And the city's area, butts right up against lots on Brown Avenue and Boyd Drive, and they've never had a separation. And, quite honestly, adding that condition right now, which is not an insignificant amount of money because we've priced it, is outside, it's outside the jurisdiction of the commission. The regs are pretty clear that if you were imposing a condition, it would have to be to meet a performance standard.
Well, Lisa, I got to interrupt because I think it's directly related to the performance standards, because we've seen not just last summer when we first documented dumping back there, which has now been cleaned up for the most part. There's new dumping back there now. And this is in the zone 1 of the water supply, and a potential new well, which would get moved, that would be in the zone 1. And so I think it's directly related to the performance standards of protecting the public water supply. And so if you can't stop that from happening, then we need to put up a fence. A fence needs to be put up. And so I think it's entirely appropriate.
Well, what do you do on Brown Ave and Boyd Drive? Have you walked
There's
those?
no open order of conditions. We're not overseeing a development project on Boyd Ave right now or Brown Ave, but we are right here, and there's dumping right here. And there's no delineation whatsoever between the backyards of those homes and the city's public water supply protection zone.
Well, that's
No
not-
delineation.
There's bounds have been set at
Well,
the back.
there's like a granite post here or there, but essentially it's a wide open lawn. There's a
Right.
wide open lawn. You can take a wheelbarrow right back up into the woods and dump your stuff, and that's what's happening. So,
So here,
I mean, we're not making this up.
Julia, I'm not saying that you're making it up, right? I'm not saying that, right? So I would ask a couple of things. So first of all, I would like to ask that the commission give us an opportunity to have the HOA reach out to all the homeowners in that back area and perhaps adopt rules and regulations about fining people that are found to have been dumping in that back. So I'd like to have some discussion first before the commission moves on with that. So we're in here for these modifications. I'd like to see if we can do that, give us an opportunity to come up with a internal kind of rule or regulation about it. It is a $50,000 expense to put a split rail fence along that property line.
Lisa, I understand it, and I don't dispute that it's not a cheap proposition, but I also don't think that telling the homeowners, they know they have a plaque in their garage. They were told all this when they bought these houses. They know that that's the water supply protection zone. If they don't, they should have been told that, but hopefully they do.
Yes,
And
they've been
I think that when people take a wheelbarrow back there and dump stuff in the woods, they're not doing it in front of their neighbors. They're not, it's not something that you can easily police. It's not something that you can easily find out who dumped what when and put a fine on them. I think that a fence is going to be the thing that stops people from doing it. A fence and some signage. I mean, it's pretty basic. It's like the most basic sort of thing. You don't need a bunch of fines and rules if you can put up a fence. And this isn't just now for during construction. This is forever. This is for the entire future of this development, which is going to be here for a really, really long time, right next to the city's untreated water supply well. Okay, so I think we have to just remember how sensitive this zone is. And we've seen some stuff dumped back there. Luckily, none of it's appears to be anyway, that we can see, harmful. But we don't want to find out that people are dumping urethanes and paints from their houses, from their garages back there where no one's looking. And it's too tempting. There's no delineation. There's no signage. So I think that it's something that really needs to be taken more seriously. And I know it's not cheap, but I think it needs to be considered seriously.
And
Okay,
I'm also fine with the first step of you attempting to do it internally. But we're gonna need to be satisfied.
so
that
let us,
it's- that'll
okay.
be taken care of.
So
And isn't there also an issue of some of the homeowners having encroached on the city land with their decks and with, I'm trying to remember what else. There was a couple of the properties along the back there that have gone over the line.
Right,
with
so I-
property markers.
So Ms. Wagon, so I'm gonna address this in the reverse. I think I addressed this earlier with, I advised Dave, Mr. Vine this. So there were 4 properties that had encroachments on city property. I understand the requirements related to the conservation restriction. We've already sent notices out to have those removed. And those property owners are in the process of removing them. In fact, today, as I said earlier, I got a notice from one of the property owners that the encroachment was moved and our bounds can be set. So we are all over that like a dirty shirt.
Okay, thank you.
The next thing is, Mr. Chair and Madam Agent, I would say that we would like to have an opportunity to come up with a solution. And Julia, I hear your issue about demarcation. And so let us see if there's something other than a split rail fence. And then we will also talk to the HOA relative to the potential, fining or whatever from that. So let us come up. I hear you. I want to be really clear. I hear you. So let us come up with a solution and come back to you when we come back to discuss these other issues if we could.
Well, it's fine with me.
Yeah, I'm okay with that if, you know, let's say a year from now when you come back and ask for an extension. You know, we'll go out and inspect.
Yeah, we're gonna address this before that, Steve.
Oh, well, I just want to, you know, you can address it, but you know, a year from now, we'll know whether it worked.
Oh, no, yeah, no. I think that's a good point. That's a really good point. Yeah, for sure. And then I would just ask one other time, and I know, Julia, I sound like a broken record on this, but this conservation restriction takes a long time to get approved. And, you know, we've been through one turn with the state and we have not gotten any comments back.
I know. I apologize. I spoke with Andy about it again last week. KMP has already taken an initial look at it. I don't think that they had many comments, but there were a few, and Andy was going to get back to them again last week. And so I haven't heard. It's just, it fell off the city's radar apparently. So I hopefully have an update for you on KMP's review.
Because we have to take a turn and get it back to the state for another turn from them. And then whatever you can do to get the water department to actually you know, accept the land that we've been told that we would give them. So that's been 1.5 years now that they've had the deed, and we've gotten no traction on that.
I don't have traction with them either, but I'll try.
So, there you go.
Okay.
So we'd request the commission approve the modifications as presented. We'll withdraw our request for an extension at this time, and then we'll be off to the planning board, and we will see you in pretty short order to address the issues that you received during the week.
Okay.
One other thing, when we were out on our site visit, we talked extensively about the connection to the Whittier Rail Trail. Or
Yes.
Path, whatever it is. And it sounded like there had been some progress. You now know what their objections are. Has there been any other progress?
Ooh, MassDOT, let's see. So I finally got I guess the person I kind of was directed around a little bit. You know, I get engaged, try and track somebody down, then get a conversation, then they'd fall off the face of the earth. I got busy. So I finally spoke with Frank Kaczynski, which I guess that's Andy Port's contact there. I've had a discussion with them. We're trying to work through it's an ongoing discussion, trying to work through some of the issues. There may be some issues regarding ADA. ADA acts, you know, where we're not ADA, you never could get an ADA compliant path, you know, up over that berm, ADA compliant. That seems to be a little bit of a sticky point now, trying to work through that, that point. They also mentioned there is access up at, they called it Pine Hill, which is, what's that, Ferry Road, and there's also access at the park and ride. So they said they're not sure. We'll have to entertain the fact having an intermediate break in the federal highway into the federal highway system.
So Steve, one of the things that we talked about when we had the site visit last week is that the city is more than willing and happy to join in on a joint meeting with them. And maybe we can push them a little bit, or at least get them to give us some more concrete answer as to what their reasons for saying no are.
Yeah, so Julia, that's actually our next step. So as soon as we got this information last week, we need to turn around. We were getting ready for the meeting tonight. We need to turn around and meet with you and Jordy and the mayor and Andy, and come up with a plan to get them to pay attention.
Okay.
Well, at this point, have you submitted any plans to them? Is there a communication that you have that has been made?
Oh yeah, I submitted multiple
so forth.
Yeah, I've submitted multiple emails with schematics and such, just schematic layout and locations where I propose to make the connection.
Was there any discussion about variances?
That's going to be the issue, David.
Yeah.
Excuse me, I didn't hear that.
That's going to be the issue, David.
Yeah, and I guess you know what you're proposing is what I'm questioning. Have you put something together in that regard?
We haven't gotten to that detail yet.
Okay.
Just trying to get them to respond.
Yeah,
Well, it's,
I'm happy I got a response, I guess.
I mean, having a plan might help the response.
I had like a whole, actually, I can forward you I had a multi, aerial plans, all kinds of, a aerial showing the Garrison Trail, our trail network, the proposed location of the connection, then the detail of what our paths look like and what the proposal of was, it was still going to be a chipstone path that would basically serpentine its way up. It would be about a 10 to 15% grade, winding up and over the slope. So that was all, I think it was like 4 PDF files presented to them.
Okay.
Yeah.
I think some of you who were on the site walk, you might have seen me, I had a plan in hand and we were looking at kind of where Steve had sketched it and left. That was part of the package that Steve had sent into Highway, I think, like a year and a half ago.
Okay.
Yeah.
Just, I see a person named Bill has her hand up. I'm not going to take any public comment during this right now. If you have something that you want to submit, please submit it to Julia. I think we're going to get the vote taken care of here, and then and move on to we have some other big items to deal with.
Joe, do we want to just mention that we did get 2 written sets of comments in from homeowners in the development that we have forwarded on to the developer, and that we'd like them to address in an itemized way?
Yeah, I think Lisa just mentioned that.
Okay.
We will.
So,
Are we going to vote before we get the itemized replies and so forth?
well, we're
I have a little trouble with that. There's a lot of observations that were made there that observations about how effective some of these changes were, which weren't particularly positive. So, well, if I asked the question, do you want to take a vote on this now or afterward?
I guess we're just approving what they've done. Whether it works or not is still an issue that if they may have to change and make more modifications.
So our request is that you approve the modifications. We don't necessarily agree with all the things that you have received, and some of them are dated. And so we would like the opportunity to respond to those, but we are not in here for a certificate of compliance that is affirming. These have all been reviewed by John Eric White, and we'd like to move to the next step and continue to refine those things that might not be working to the point that we would. But we need to get to the planning board with some of these so we can move on in that direction.
David, would it make sense to maybe schedule another meeting with this on the agenda specifically to have Evergreen's responses presented to us and to the public, the abutters, neighbors, on those items?
We're happy to come to the first meeting in June. I just didn't give you a date. I'm happy to do that. We can set the first meeting in June.
Well, I guess I could go along with what Steve said as far as establishing that these were the changes that's made so far. And if they can't, the part that bothered me was some of the observations they had days after rains and things like that things weren't working effectively. But I don't know specifically if it was these things or something else. I don't have a problem with, like Steve said, just approving the changes thus far, and if it doesn't solve the problem, then they're going to have to come back again.
Yeah. So we'll schedule a public hearing for the first meeting in June, and we'll discuss the comments from the homeowners association folks and from the developer. We'll just have a discussion then. So
important for us to focus on the conservation issues and our jurisdictional issues. a lot of the stuff that were identified in that letter didn't necessarily seem to be issues related to what we're doing.
Right, but a lot of it can be traced back to water quality
Yeah.
issues, and that's pretty much our bailiwick too. And we're concerned about folks doing, going out on their own and putting down unapproved fertilizers and stuff like that. So this whole thing is about water quality. As far as I'm concerned, a lot of it is at minimum tangentially, water quality related. So at least that's my take on it.
No, I think that's right, but I would think that we could approve these minor changes, approve these changes as minor in the original filing, so that they can start with that new set of plans with other departments. And but that doesn't mean that they do not have to address all those other concerns.
Yeah.
Do you all want to see the language for the change in the homeowners association document that Lisa provided,
Sure.
which is right here? So 8.2.16a, lot owners shall not increase the impervious area on each individual lot by more than 5% over the size of the lot at the time the certificate of occupancy is issued for that lot. B, notwithstanding the foregoing, the following lots shall not increase the impervious area on the lot by more than 2% over the size of the lot at the time of the certificate of occupancy is issued for that lot. And those are lots 10, 11, 12, and 13. This number shall be cumulative over the life of the lot, and swimming pools shall be considered impervious area. So that would be the change that you could vote on tonight. We'll also go to the plan.
Well, what about all of the small changes they made to,
And those as well, and then those are the change so that would be the change to the homeowners association document, and
Right.
the change to the plans are outlined in this additional letter that we have, and the plans that are associated with it that we have updated. And so I can attach all that to your vote on the minor modification.
Yeah. Okay. Then I will make that motion to approve the minor modifications.
Second,
Roll call, Paul Haley,
Yes.
Steve Moore,
yes.
Dan Warshall,
Aye.
David Vine,
Yes.
Carol Wagon,
Yes.
and I vote yes.
Thank you very
Thank
much.
you very much.
All right, thank you.
Onward.
Onward and upward. You had a motion to open the public hearings.
So moved.
All in favor?
Second.
I got a second there. All in favor? All right,
Aye.
opposed? All right, thank you. All right, the first item is the City of Newburyport Upper Artichoke Reservoir Dam Notice of Intent. They have asked for a continuance until the May 18th meeting.
Yes, that's correct. Yep. They're still
Motion to
working on the
continue.
stormwater design.
I hear a motion to continue.
So moved.
I'll second. I guess we got to roll call that one. Roll call, Paul Haley,
Yes.
Steve Moore. Steve, we lost Steve. right.
Uh-oh.
Uh-oh.
Dan Warshall.
Oh, did I actually
Yes.
accidentally make Steve?
You just
I
got
did.
Steve.
I'm sorry, Steve. Oh, I'm so,
let's
the
get him back.
names shift
There he
around
is.
like
Back.
while you're working on this thing, all of a sudden the names have moved and you accidentally did it to somebody else. Okay, I'm sorry, Steve.
All right, Steve, unmute yourself and I want to hear your vote.
Yes.
All right, where am I here? David, I got you already, I think.
Yeah.
Carol Wagon,
Yes.
and I vote yes. That was unnecessarily difficult.
Sorry.
Next item is Robert Condon, 1176th Street, notice of intent.
Okay.
Good evening, Tom Hughes with Hughes Environmental Consulting here on behalf of Bobby Condon. If we can go to the plan that was just submitted, what I would like to point out is we have added a few features. We've added 2 red cedars proposed up along 76th Street. We confirmed that the trees that were planted are red maple, and they actually seem to be pretty healthy. And also the wood platform out back, we now show a clamshell patio with cobble edging and a permanent landing and stairs to replace the temporary landing of stairs. The landing, I think, is a 4x6 deck with stairs coming down. And we also show the detail on the fence. So out front, it is going to either remain the rope system that's there, or it will be the open rail fence that you see. And around back, it will be the open rail fence, and there'll be rabbit wire used to keep the dog in the yard on that. So we did a site visit. I think the commission saw, and I think you can kind of see how what we've proposed, I think, is going to be a overall improvement over the pre-existing conditions before the violations occurred. And I'm happy to answer any questions from the commission, and then would like to ask that you issue an order approving this.
Do you have anything?
All looks good when we looked at it yesterday.
Mm-hmm. It did.
I'll make a motion to close the public hearing.
Do you need anyone from the public?
Oh,
Oh, yeah. Yeah, any comments from the public on 1176th Street? No, seeing none.
Second.
All right, roll call. Paul Healy,
Yes.
Steve Moore,
yes.
Dan Warshaw,
Yes.
David Vine,
Yes.
Carol Wagon,
Yes.
and I vote yes.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Tom. Okay, next item. Mayor Donna Holiday, City Newburyport, and the Department of Conservation and Recreation, Reservation Terrace, notice of intent.
Okay, let me see if I can do this correctly and get Anders, promote to a panelist. See if there's anybody else here for this presentation. You can raise your hand if you're going to join Anders in the presentation, but otherwise I think we just have Anders.
Okay, can you hear me?
Yes.
Very good.
Anders, just tell me where you'd like me to go in the plans and I will go there.
Yeah, well, I know that the commission is familiar with the project. I think that I guess I can, unless people object, I can quickly summarize the situation at Reservation Terrace and the purpose of this particular project.
Okay.
Okay, so this project is intended to be an interim measure to mitigate flooding and shoreline erosion that has been occurring at an accelerated rate inside the jetty on the Merrimack, south end of the Merrimack River along Reservation Terrace. And that area has seen about, on average, about 50 feet of loss of dune over the past 8 years or so. And there are larger scale, more permanent projects in the works to address the erosion, to protect the existing infrastructure along Reservation Terrace, which includes water and sewer lines, as well as the private residents along Reservation Terrace. The most important one of those is probably the Nourishment Project that the Corps of Engineers has currently scheduled for the fall, this coming fall and winter, where they have a project that would place about 60,000 cubic yards of compatible sand dredged from the Merrimack River and Newburyport Harbor onto Reservation Terrace, sort of on the west end of the jetty. There's a little bit of a hook of a stone spur there. And their project is to address that area and basically protect the jetty from being eroded at the south or the west end. And in addition to that, the Corps performed what they call a 204 study, which is a beneficial use of dredged sediment. And that identified over 200,000 cubic yards of dredge material that's also compatible to be placed just farther to the west. And the non-federal sponsor for that would be the Department of Conservation and Recreation. So that Nourishment Project will buy several years of protection. And again, the project that we're talking about tonight is intended to try to buy enough time to protect the infrastructure and homes until that project is in place. As most people probably know, it's been a battle to try to protect the homes and infrastructure lately. The bulk sandbags for the Super Sack project that was implemented last fall, obviously did not survive the winter and the early spring storms. Those sandbags have now been removed, which is great. Even though the current project included removing those if they were still there at the time. And what happened was that after the last storm a couple of months ago, obviously, the mayor was very concerned and was reaching out to just about everybody for assistance. And the state had suggested the use of core envelopes to hold the shoreline. There was a project down in Sandwich that utilized these core envelopes with some success, and we were asked by the city to design a short-term barrier using that approach that would be appropriate for Reservation Terrace. Julia, if you want to advance to the drawings, please.
Sure.
So this is just our plan view of Reservation Terrace running along that gray gray line, thick line. That's the proposed barrier. Thank you. And you'll also note those cross sections A through F. And we're going to take a look at those in a second. But a lot of this barrier is on city property along Reservation Terrace, but at the northwest and the southeast limits, it does extend onto DCR property, which makes them a property owner, and they're signing the notice of intent as a result. If you would advance to the cross sections, please. So the design consists of a series of stacked core envelopes, and the core envelopes are 4 layers of coir coconut fiber fabrics. I should mention that all materials in this project are biodegradable. And within the core envelopes, there's also a jute mesh layer and then compatible sand. So the concept is to basically excavate to install these core envelopes, fill with excavated sand, and then construct additional core envelopes above that to serve as a barrier to overtopping and wave runup. And initially, there seemed to be enough site sand stockpiled in people's driveways and at the end of the roads to fill the core envelopes. That may not be the case anymore, in which case we would ask the contractor to supply compatible sand from off-site sources. So at the bottom here, we have 2 envelopes, or I'll explain this one behind the seaward post in a minute. But due to potential scour, we've buried a core envelope in front of the barrier. And this, so here are the posts. Julia, could you zoom in a little bit?
Do you want me to zoom in on this section
That
over
would be
here on the
great.
right?
Yes, thank you. Thank you very much. So the 6x6 posts are intended, they're on the seaward side on a 4-foot on center spacing, and on the back side at a 3-foot center spacing. They're non-treated. They would be driven about 6 feet below ground with a stick up of about 4 feet. They would be smoothed at the edges, sanded, and wrapped in core fabric to help reduce friction along the core envelopes. And these core envelopes are typically, I think they're about 40 feet long, and they're stitched at the ends. They're stitched at the tops. And yeah, okay, so that describes the core envelopes. Now this middle one here, this is intended to utilize the existing concrete blocks that are out on the site that have been there for decades. And we believe that there is a row that extends to the northwest as far as has been uncovered so far, but there may not be. So if there isn't, then we would install another core envelope underneath just to support the pyramid of envelopes on top of it and reduce the potential for scour through this and undermining. The system would require maintenance, and it's not intended to last very long. So I think that the maintenance would definitely be within the 3-year period of the order of conditions. But it would be expected that after big storms, you might get some posts that would be leaning or broken, or some bags that would tear that would need to be stitched or maybe even replaced. I have to emphasize that the survivability of this system is very difficult to quantify. It will be damaged in storms, particularly storms with astronomical high tides or storm surges, and could be overwhelmed completely by a really large nor'easter. So that's something that everybody needs to be aware of. However, it will provide quite a bit of relative protection from the run-up of the waves and flooding of the homes and the undermining of Reservation Terrace and potentially the utilities underneath it.
Anders, how would you compare the survivability of this as compared to the super sacks?
Yes, had a little bit of a hard time hearing me, but I think I got it. This should survive quite a bit better. Those super sacks did not end up having any scour protection the way they were installed. The initial intent was to place them on top of and slightly behind the concrete blocks that were existing. And during construction, that couldn't be accomplished. So they were basically left to be undermined. And because they're individual bags not connected to each other, they started to move around rather quickly. These are, to mitigate those effects, these are stitched, they're 40 feet long, they're stitched together at the ends, and they're held in place by these posts. So it really boils down to how quickly, to how much the core envelopes can withstand the wave forces and other environmental exposure for survival. But it's a lot better.
Anders, would you say that covering these bags with additional sand at some point might be a good idea? Or would you leave them exposed?
It would be great to cover this system with sand. And I think that's something that should be pursued after the Nourishment Project. However, until that nourishment is placed, I don't think that sand would be able to stay in place.
Right. So the reason why I'm asking is I'm just thinking about a special condition for this, which would be in terms of maintenance of the bags, that periodic maintenance of the system after large storms could include replacing the posts, replacing core bags. But just in the eventuality that there is some sand or there is a situation that made it seem like a good idea to put sand on top of them, should we write that into a special condition that it's allowed?
I think that would be great to write in, yes. And I think that, you know, thinking ahead, ideally after the nourishment, they would be covered with sand and planted with dune grass.
Yeah, okay.
Uh,
Planted, yeah.
In the NOI, there was, I think, one sentence that said, if the dredging of the river takes place this fall, this winter, that this project may not go forward. Does that make any sense?
Well, it does, because, you know, this is a significant cost, and it's a trade-off. It's a difficult decision for the city to make, to spend, you know, possibly $500,000 on an effort like this. But I know that the mayor really wants to, you know, that there are so few options, and this is really the best that we could come up with. And if it's in place, and it looks like, particularly if the Coors project is delayed due to a permitting issue or due to a contracting issue, I believe the last time they did it, they were delayed a year because of a bid protest for the dredging work. Something like that, and you've got to have something to get you through a winter. But it's a lot of money.
Right.
And Anders, could you tell me what is the timeline on when this particular method will be able to be installed and ready to go?
Implemented, yes. Well, it would be when the order of conditions and the MEPA certificate is in hand, then the city would have the option to implement it. However, you know, we're coming up on the summer months, and the necessity to do that, I think, is much less urgent until we get to the fall, or close to the fall. So there are issues. There's beach access issues. You know, there's durability issues. You know, people may be walking on these things. So I wouldn't recommend jumping out and doing it too early. And we have piping plover issues, which can be dealt with a monitor. But, you know, ideally we'd be doing this work after the plover season.
How long do you think it would take to do the construction?
We've been talking to a contractor by the name of Sumco, who's done quite a bit of work in this area, and a gentleman by the name of Dave Lager, who used to be on his own, is now with Sumco, and he was the person who helped design some of the work that was done years ago at Center Island using a similar installation. And he figures that it's probably about a month.
Okay.
couple questions, Anders. Are these staggered or are they, do you have them all ending at the same place?
Yeah, we haven't specified that, but I think it would make sense to stagger them, Dave.
Yeah,
That makes good sense. You know, the stitching is not going to be as strong as the you know, a non-joint.
yeah, yeah, I was just thinking that. Also, somewhere in the plans or it was in the narrative, you say remove the super sacks in the footprint of the project. And I am a little concerned of limiting it to that. I would say if in the process of this, you find remnants of the super sacks or any of that kind of thing, that the contractor should be alerted to take those out.
Yeah, that makes sense. I think, again, most of them hopefully were already removed. But certainly if they're encountered or seen, that would make excellent sense to get that out of there.
Yeah, maybe any that are encountered, you know, I'm not looking to go, you know, underwater and all that, but I mean, in the process of doing this, you're gonna see a lot of changes, so I just like to see that.
Yeah, absolutely.
And
we can list
did
that
you
as a
say
condition.
these will be covered? I mean, these aren't gonna be removed if, once they're installed and they, and the nourishment comes, you're just gonna fill over these?
That would be recommended, yes.
Yeah, okay.
I mean, the nourishment alone, based on, you know, the DCR North Shore Sediment Report and local knowledge and history, it's not a permanent solution. So if it's covered with sand, then it will degrade much slower and will hopefully be in a condition to provide some additional protection the next time the erosion gets to this point.
Yeah.
Although that would be a bonus.
I'm going to put you on the spot.
Okay.
Given sea level rise, and if we get nourishment, how long do you think this would last? You know, if you've got everything covered, you've got, I don't know, maybe a couple 100 feet of beach, but sea level is rising and the jetty's not fixed, that's still causing problems. How long would this last?
You mean the Nourishment Project or
Yeah.
the or this?
Well, the combined, the nourishment and the core bags.
I mean, the core bags alone are, you know, a bad winter is really about it in its current condition.
Okay.
Now with nourishment, the nourishment would prevent the bags from being exposed to wave action, and if covered, ultraviolet degradation. So, you know, that could be reserved capacity so that if the Nourishment Project buys you, it's hard to say. I mean, you know, it may be on the order of 4 to 8 years, maybe. I'm throwing that out there as a ballpark. Then, you know, you'd be back to square one at the end of that point. So sea level rise, although it's significant, we're looking at a shorter time frame to really make it all that significant. I think the increased storm frequency and intensity associated with climate change is probably the bigger impact on this time scale.
Yeah, because we could get another blizzard of 78 and it could blow all that right out. You know,
Yeah, and but the
24
higher this particular site is the erosion is very much related to how high the water level is during storms. And back in 2018, we had a storm surge that was almost as high as the blizzard of 78. and there was a lot of damage back then. But the actual storm itself that we had in 2018 was nowhere near the intensity of the blizzard of 78. So what we were seeing was, the storm surge was about the same height, but it wasn't as intense of a storm. So, you're seeing the effects of sea level rise right there from 1978 to 2018. I believe it was like 4 or 5 inches. And if we have that kind of intensity with today's, 4 or 5 inches plus, it's going to be devastating. And ultimately, there are other issues. I mean, the northern tip of Plum Island, as we all know and discussed in the city's vulnerability report, it's got issues. It's got backdoor flooding issues. It's
It's a tough call.
It's very difficult.
So
And
let's say,
and the thing, I'll just say one other thing. I mean, normally, just from a personal standpoint, when you live on a barrier beach, you got to expect things like this. But this particular situation, because of the impact of the jetty repairs, is really highly accelerated, and it didn't really allow for the planning, both on the community level and the state level and on the individual property owners level, to deal with this like you would have in a normal situation where you're losing 2 to 3 feet per year. I mean, we're talking about 50 feet per year. So I am sympathetic, even though I live inland, and I'm actually a little jealous, but it's a unique situation in that respect.
so if we were to take your 4 to 8 years that this is going to last, and let's say it lasts 6 years, and we're back to where we are now, assuming that the jetty doesn't get fixed so that it doesn't cause these problems, we would be looking at this problem and we wouldn't have a source of sediment because they're not going to dredge the river again in 6 years, more than likely.
Well, I think historically they used to dredge it at a much higher frequency. It's been a long time. It's been 10 or 11 years since they did it, and that's much longer than it used to be. But there are other efforts in place to mitigate the situation. There are talks about the captain's fishing charters there, the Charos on the North Point, where they have maintenance dredging. They're getting a lot of sand accretion that is interfering with their operations. And I know the folks at the Plum Island Taxpayers Association and the Merrimack River Beach Alliance are working to try to come up with a way to take sand that is dredged from their property and have that on hand for nourishment where needed. And there's also, Senator Tarr at these MRBA meetings is always pushing for a long-term or a longer-term solution. And he did read that DCR North Shore Sediment Management Report, and he astutely picked up the need to do something other than beach nourishment. And that report recommends either offshore breakwaters or some sort of a weir to allow that northerly flow of sand over or through the South Jetty to help feed this system here. So there are other efforts that are being made.
Steve, are your questions, are you suggesting that the plan be modified in any way as to, or I'm not sure I understand what?
No, well, I guess I recognize this as a temporary solution. Just how long that temporary solution is what I'm trying to get at. And, you know, it could be, as Anders says, 4 years, 6 years, 8 years, maybe even longer. Who knows? We aren't capable of predicting the future. I'm just, in good conscience, I feel this is the last time that I can vote to approve a temporary solution. You know, we've approved time after time, you know, less money than this, you know, 50,000 here, 100,000 there. If this is going to be $500,000, I'm fine with approving it now, but going forward, you know, this is the last time I think I can go for something that's temporary. We need to come up with something that's a more permanent solution. Whether that's, I think the Weir jetty might be a solution, but with rising sea level, eventually that jetty's going to be underwater most of the tide cycle. So whether that would still continue to work, I don't know. The other solution is that, you know, the homeowners get bought out. And that's a difficult proposition. I think we talked about that the other day. And, you know, I guess
Well,
it's
I'm
very
not sure
difficult
that
to
it's,
meet the FEMA qualifications to actually get bought out.
let's not, I don't think we should get too far ahead of ourselves here at this point. I mean, right now, this seems to be a reasonable solution. It doesn't, it's not a hard structure. It's not a permanent structure. And the need sounds to be pretty essential right now. I mean, if it doesn't last, it doesn't last.
Right.
We'll have to cross that bridge when we get to it.
I'm fine with approving this. I'm just reluctant in going forward approving something else that's temporary.
Okay.
A couple questions, Anders. The end conditions, how would that be impacted? I know when we did do the core bags at the center of the island in Newbury, we did get conditions at the end of this. How is that going to be handled?
Yeah, that's a good point. It's pretty much unavoidable to have some end effects there. And what we've done is we've extended the southeast and the northwest limits, as you can see on this plan, to extend to areas where there is still significant dune left, so that in recognition of potential end effects, we've got a margin there of, you know, in the case of the southeast end, maybe 30, 40 feet of dune that's elevated that we tie into. And similarly, on the northwest corner, we have the same situation, although there's a lot more dune there. It's lower up there, but we're tying into a high point that's above the elevation. So we're tying into elevations of existing dune that are higher than the barrier. But it's still, you know, and I'm more worried about the northwestern one than the southeastern one, because that southeastern corner is kind of protected in the pocket down there.
Yeah, it's also out further from the home, so which is good too. The ones that we had done, I think it was 2009, I don't think were as large as this, and they held up pretty well, just within months of the core dredging. And these are larger and they seem more rugged. So, I mean, I don't know anything as far as the cost benefit of doing this or not doing it, but what you're putting out there is, you know, it seems to be the only thing that could get accepted, which is the way it seems like it's going.
Yeah, I think that's a good point. This is the best because, you know, obviously there are hard structures that would be much more effective and reliable and have survivability, but it's not going to happen. So this is the best we could do with a soft solution.
Okay. All right, Councilor Zede.
Yes, good evening. Thank you, Mr. Chair. I appreciate it. I didn't know when a good time was, so I just let it raise my hand and wait to be recognized. I appreciate you recognizing me and giving me an opportunity to speak. So I know you've had a long meeting, so I'll try and keep my comments brief. But the two things I wanted to mention were, number one is on this project specifically, I'd really ask for you to consider supporting it. I think Commissioner Warchall gave kind of the sort of the bullet list actually that I was going to give, which is, it's always a, threading the needle with Plum Island. And the way what I've learned is there are three constraints. There's always the physical constraint, which changes all the time. What we could have done 3 years ago when there was some dune left is very different from what we may be able to do today from a construction standpoint. There's of course the financial aspect of it, which is a whole nother question, and you've touched upon it briefly here. And then of course the one that's sort of most central tonight is the regulatory framework. And so this project, and with all the credit really going to Anders and the folks he works with, trying to thread that needle and get right down the middle. So I think the project is worth supporting and is an honest effort to both learn from recent history with the super sacs, which sadly didn't perform quite the way we had hoped, and as well as sort of the longer term history, and to implement something that does have some basis in Newbury in more recent history, and then in other communities, as Anders mentioned. So I hope you'll consider that. On the larger scale, the larger discussion, I think to Commissioner Moore's point, no one would agree more that there's a desire for a permanent solution than the residents of Plum Island. I mean, they would love to be here applying for something and not having to come see you for a very long time. I personally, I mean, I've learned a lot. I definitely don't think anybody can promise that this is the last short-term or near-term solution you may see, but I think that there is a solid promise that can be made that there are tons of discussions going about medium and long-term discussions. Julie and I are often on those calls together, as is Anders. And again, nobody wants that more than the residents. I certainly would love to see it. And I do think that the key to unlocking that in large part is the jetty, and with the recognition that the jetty itself is a balancing act. If you let too much sand through, you will end up with problems on the other end, which was not a too distant of a memory. And so it is this fine balancing act between multiple different things. And the last thing I wanted to mention is I think we've all seen a lot of Plum Island studies. It seems to be studied almost endlessly, but that sediment study that Anders has referred to a few times is, in my opinion, the essential work on the island in the last, of all the studies I've read in the last 10 years. And I can't share my screen. I don't know, Julia, if you mind if I just show a quick picture. You'd have to stop for me to share, but I just wanted to show one quick thing to show the broader picture that I've shared with others, and I'll get it right here very quickly. Bear with me for 1 second. Here it is. So hopefully you can see this now, but the reason I really like sharing this is I in my daily travels, talk to a lot of people about Plum Island, and there's all this discussion about the last 3 years, 5 years, 10 years. When you look at one like this, you can actually see a decades long, flow basically, or cyclical nature. And so that's one of the things that's discussed heavily in the report. Different people call the condition we're in right now different things. Some people call it an eddy, some people call it a whirlpool. Some people who live on the island have funky names for it. But long story short is, the beach comes and goes over decades, not over a year, not over months. And there's also, I think, in my opinion, correlation here you can see between the jetty reconstructions and the black and the red lines that run vertically and the impact on the beach. And that's part of that acceleration that I think Anders mentioned. So I'm not an engineer, but certainly I can look at a chart like this and make some reasonable conclusions. So you can see we were at a height of beach back in, say, 2008, 7, 6, and we're on the downward trend now. And most of the people anecdotally who live on the island will tell you that eventually the eddy breaks, and that you hope that the sand comes in and that there's a relationship with the jetty. So I just wanted to mention that, again, not to take up your whole night, but really just to share what the longer term discussions are, and to promise you that I don't enjoy being on these phone calls to come try and sell you another short term. I think Anders doesn't either. I know Julia and I talk a lot again about finding that more permanent, not forever permanent, although we dream about that solution, and that dredging is part of that. A modification to the jetty is part of that. Discussions about the spur, buyouts are part of that discussion too. So, and it goes all the way from bottom to top. I'm at the bottom in the city, and then all the way up to the feds. So again, thank you very much for listening to me for a few minutes, and I'll certainly hang out if I can be of further service in your deliberation.
Okay, thank you. Do we have anything else on this? All right, not seeing any. I'll go first with Mark and Leila Wright, and then we can talk to Mark Wright.
Okay, Mark and Leila, I've just allowed you to unmute yourselves.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes.
Hi, Leila Wright, 55 Reservation Terrace. I'm the house at the section where there's very little road left and nothing between us and the water at the moment except a few scattered blocks. But I also realize that I'm probably one of the most at-risk houses, but I want to say, please do not jeopardize the dredge for this project. And I don't mean to sound ungrateful, but the dredge is really, really important for so many other reasons. But I do want to suggest, if possible, if we could pull the blocks back up into place and possibly try something like an adaptive reuse effort to clean up the beach of the 200 plus scattered concrete blocks between 75th Street and the parking lot. I don't know if any of you have been down here, but I actually counted them myself, and there are over 200 random blocks in a pattern of some sort. And where they're already on the beach, technically, maybe they could be added to the area where the existing wall was, just for, you know, a temporary measure. We know they can be taken out of here tomorrow if they need to be. But it would cost far less than what you're suggesting to spend on this effort with the coir bags that may offer little or no protection in a major storm. Just a thought. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Mark Wright?
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
So I just wanted to comment, having been on the meeting and seen the enormous revetment that's being built to protect the city's infrastructure less than a nautical mile inland from us. It's very difficult for me to understand how that project can get permitted to have a hard structure to protect things, and we can't get a hard structure to protect the same city infrastructure less than a mile away as far as the river flows. But in general, I'm in support of any temporary measures that we can have. I just want to be sure that that the larger project goes forward, because that'll provide the largest amount of protection for. Obviously, we're concerned about our homes, but we're also concerned about the city's infrastructure.
Okay. With regards to the differences, one issue is this is a barrier beach. The revetments inland are on solid ground. It's not a barrier beach, so that's a major issue. I don't.
Just another point, Joe, to follow up on that, is that there had previously been historically a revetment or seawall in that location in front of the wastewater treatment plant. Yeah, so they're sort of rebuilding it.
Rebuild our wall.
Go ahead.
Okay, we have got anybody else would like to comment? Okay. In that case, hearing none, what do we want to do? Do we want to entertain a motion, or I will entertain a motion?
A motion to close the public hearing?
Second.
All right, roll call. Paul Healy,
Yes.
Steve Moore,
Yes.
Dan Warshall,
Yes.
David Vine,
Yes.
Carol Wagon,
Yes.
and I vote yes. All right, Anders, thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thanks,
Okay.
Anders.
Bye.
All right, then, can I get a motion to close the public hearings?
So moved.
So moved.
Second,
All in favor? Aye,
Aye.
aye.
opposed? Okay. Let's go over to orders of conditions. Let's get those out of the way first.
Okay. First one would be 1176th Street. Notice of intent for the revised landscape work. There were no special conditions brought up specific to that project. Nothing to be added to the plans. Unless you can think of something now.
No, not that I could think of.
Motion to issue an order of conditions.
Second.
Okay, roll call, Paul Healy,
Yes.
Steve Moore,
Yes.
Dan Warshall,
Yes,
David Vine,
Yes.
Carol Wagon,
Yes.
and I vote yes. All right, and the DCR Reservation Terrace. One special condition that I think I'd like to have added would relate to David's question. Maybe we can word it like the contractor will take into account staggering the bags, just so it's in writing. So, you know, if they say, oh, we don't want to do that, that's fine, but as long as it's there for them to
Okay, so the contractor shall consider staggering the placement of coir bags.
do we want to put that like longitudinally? Would that be right, David?
Yeah, and I wouldn't say consider.
Yeah, okay,
And because, I mean, Anders had already said that he implied that he would be incorporating that into the contract documents, so.
okay.
Oh, okay. All right, I missed that part.
But I mean, we can still say it. It's just the considered
Yeah,
part.
no, I think it's good to put it in as a
Stagger
condition.
placement.
Yeah, just,
How about this? The contractor shall stagger the placement of the coir bags as appropriate during construction to increase stability.
Yeah.
I think you want to say stagger the joints, just to be clear exactly what we're talking about.
Okay,
So
okay,
that, you know, one joint
Yep.
isn't on top of the other.
yeah.
yeah.
And the part about the super sacks, extending it beyond the footprint of the work.
So any super sack remnants encountered during construction shall be removed from the site by the contractor and disposed of
Yes.
off-site, okay.
Do we say anything about the timing on all this, apropos of the earlier comments about when the dredging might happen, or do we just need to go forward because the assumption is that it'll be too long until that happens?
Yeah, we can't, we got a rule on this, this project. I don't personally, I know it's expensive, but I don't see there's any downside to having this in place with or without the dredging, because then it'll be something that's sitting there as backup. And, you know, the city can come to that decision or not, but.
If it doesn't work, the thinking is that the dredging will be happening sometime soon. sooner or later.
It may happen in the fall, and it may happen in a year and a half.
Okay.
In any event, we just need to approve the project, and the city can decide when and if it's installed.
Yeah, because they'll have 3 years. The permit will be good for 3 years. So if they need extra time to consider whether or not, you know, what Army Corps thinks about it, then they'll have that time to work it out.
Yeah, I wouldn't think this would affect whatever placement there is of sand at all,
Yeah,
since this is
right.
like mostly right up on city property anyways.
The work, as far as environmental windows and such, I know that that's going to be brought up by other reviewers. I mean, I don't know what the details are. I'm assuming we don't have to make reference except maybe to say in accordance with other agencies, marine fisheries.
Yeah,
maybe-
we can do that because they have to go through this MIPA process now too. So who knows what that will give them in terms of comments.
I mean, there's some of this is very obvious. I mean, the plovers and so forth, but I don't think us spelling it out necessarily is the right thing. Maybe just referencing in accordance with all agencies, environmental windows.
Okay. One comment that DEP noted in their review of this on their website is that they would like the commission to be provided a report on any sand brought in from outside to fill the core bags, and that report shall include a compatibility analysis and grain size analysis to make sure it's consistent with Plum Island. So I'll add that as a special condition as well.
Okay.
Did they
Then
have
there
any other
was-
comments on this? No, huh?
No.
Okay.
The only other condition that was discussed during the hearing was that maintenance of the system may take place periodically and after large storms to replace posts, the core bags, or additional sand nourishment to cover and protect the bags, as well as planting with native vegetation.
Mhm.
Over the
Okay.
course of 3 years, they might want to do some of that.
Who would be responsible for the maintenance? The city?
Yeah.
That could be a significant
No.
expense.
No. The city's got to decide whether they do it or not.
Yeah.
Hmm.
We got anything else?
That's all I had written down.
Okay. Get a motion?
Motion to
to
issue the
issue
above
certificate of
conditions.
compliance. Oh, I'll second it then.
Okay. All right, roll call. Paul Healy,
Yes.
Steve Moore,
Yes.
Dan Warshaw,
Yes.
David Vine,
Yes.
Carol Wagon,
Yes.
and I vote yes. All righty. Off we go to enforcements and violations. So with 1176, we're keeping that in abeyance until we get
Um,
things
Think we'll-
taken care of.
Yeah, till the work's done.
yes,
Okay.
All right, and
I'm looking for what I just had earlier. Hold on. I'm just gonna pause sharing. Keep going, Joe. I'm just gonna see if I can find that set of photos right now.
oh, okay. All right, so the next item, you're talking about Gloria Brownhart?
Yeah.
So the next item is the Gloria Brownhart Bike Trail and changes that were made by one Mr. Mullins. So as you can see in these pictures, I took a walk out there with a friend and 4 of us, Carol, Steve, was it you, David?
Yeah.
Yeah, and I walked out there and looked in this specific area for changes. As I think we've discussed before, Jerry Mullins on the behalf of, I guess, Parker River Clean Water Association was setting up the old roadbed, which is now the Gloria Brownhart bike trail, as a official bike trail, or as a what's the term? You going to specs of
Oh, like a multi-use trail, or
yeah, he had gotten a grant for doing this, and you may remember that we did have a discussion, informal discussion with Jerry about soil, and he wanted to place soil on the roadbed, and well, he originally told us he was putting sod down, and then he was actually going to be dirt and grass seed. And from what I heard from folks on Parker River, I don't remember if I shared that with everybody or not, but part of Jerry's idea, besides making it a standard multi-use trail, he wanted to assist in the drainage and everything, because there are all sorts of stormwater drains still left over from the old roadbed, which really he wasn't qualified to make those decisions, but he decided to go ahead with placing soil on both sides of a mile-long roadbed. So you can see all the straight line soil is, the vast majority of it at least, is soil he placed on there. And in some cases, as you can see some of the other photos, he took it directly from the side of the trail, like that one, and that one there. And these are all photos taken on Saturday, so you can see the grass all around these bare spots growing quite nicely, but the bare spots are still bare. And despite my telling him on several occasions that he can't be doing this, he continued to do it. And I think we need, and this bottom photo here shows runoff going down into the stormwater drains, or erosion going down into the stormwater drains, exactly as we had predicted it would. If we got a heavy rainstorm, it would just start washing that soil away. So the mayor had, we had a discussion with a lot of with the parks and planning and everything, discussions about possibly parks taking over this bike trail, as part of their work. But we're here now, and frankly, I'm of the opinion we need to issue a notice of violation to Jerry, because Jerry's the one, all the times I walked out there, I didn't see anybody else moving soil like this. And this particular spot was the last spot I saw him removing soil from, which is this one's kind of the saddest part for me, because he's the president of the Parker River Clean Water Association, and the Little River flows directly into the Parker River, and there's erosion from a spot that he denuded going into the Little River. I feel we should, and that I didn't even discuss the tree cutting that he did, which none of it, he didn't have any permits for doing any of that. And some of it may have been justified, but he still should have requested approval. So I'm of the opinion that we should consider issuing a notice of violation against him and have him come in, and I think he needs to get the soil off the road and replace it back in the spots that he took it from. And I didn't find all the different spots. I didn't go looking for all the different spots he took soil from, but he clearly took it from more spots than those 3 that I took pictures of. So I don't know how the rest of the commission feels about.
Well, I think, you know, what he's doing is work that he presented to us in the informal discussion, and the end result of that informal discussion was that we told him he needed to come back with an NOI, which he's never done. So I agree with Joe that, you know, I think we've been more than fair with him, but he's continued to do work that's not authorized. And we need to have a serious discussion with him. And, you know, if the notice of violation is how we do it, then that's fine.
Yeah, I really think, because in some discussions I had with members of the Parker River Board, you know, one of the things he could have done instead of moving all the soil was simply hire a painter and paint stripes on the road. But he decided this was a better way to do it because of the stormwater drains, I guess.
Joe, can I ask a question? What was the point originally of narrowing the road bed, either with paint or with this grass that he wants to?
It's all the he wanted to tie this in. He's been in discussions with the Coastal Trails Coalition. He did a lot of work to make it ADA compliant, like coming from well, he, you know, the grant that he got helped pay for stone dust and everything coming from the Story Ave end, and for the other end too, where he just finished putting in those 4x4 edging, the 4x4 edging, and I guess he just wanted to bring it up to code for a multi-use trail, which I guess is like 10 feet wide or something. I don't really know.
It doesn't make a lot of sense that they would
No.
require something like that.
One thing to make it wider to accommodate the number of users, but to make it smaller just seems like a waste of resources.
Yeah. This was one of his constant statements is Mother Nature's taking this over anyways, and he was just accelerating that and making it a standard path width. But you know, there's still a lot, you know, there's a lot more room on there without the soil on there, and it makes walking on it easier too.
Yeah.
Especially the photos where he put that big line of grass clumps. You're constantly tripping on those things when you're trying to walk and talk with people. The bottom photo there, it just, none of it really makes a lot of sense. But,
Well, I can't see how we'd have any choice but to issue. It just, I mean, he's done things that anyone else we would have issued. And I don't know what the mechanism is to do this in the future. I guess fines or something, if this is brought to our attention that he's done other things that are this sort.
Oh, that just reminded me of one other issue. He signed an agreement with the mayor, which I neglected to send out to everybody, but he signed an agreement with the mayor to maintain this roadway as president of the Parker River Clean Water Association. And in that agreement, he states that he will notify the city of any wetlands violations, which is
Joe,
ironic to say the least.
I'm happy to send out a notice of violation to Jerry on this, and you know, we are based on educated guesses, assuming that this was his work. So I think a notice of violation is appropriate, and he can come in and explain whether or not he did it and why. But can you help me out? Are these areas definitively within wetland buffer zones? Well, obviously the one by the stream bed is.
I think the vast majority of the trail, I remember a long time ago, Bill Deasy did a delineation out here, and he said, well, we're going to say the entire road bed's within the 100-foot buffer.
Okay.
Well, it's also a river too, so we got 200-foot
Yeah.
riverfront. So it's all within 200 feet of the river.
Got it. Okay, that's all I need.
Okay. And I do have, I've got 4 eyewitnesses beyond me that saw him working at the site next to the overlook. So actually, I had an encounter twice with him because he was originally out there to build steps on that trail, that side trail where when we told him he couldn't put a bridge in, he was going to put steps on the side trail, and I told him he had to send pictures to Julie before he does anything. So then he moved down to near the overlook and had his wheelbarrow down there. He was digging, and I told him to stop, and he ignored me and took the wheelbarrow off and dumped it on the roadbed somewhere. So that was my last straw.
Now, who is in actual control of this trail?
That's the problem.
Yeah. Okay. No, I was just
yeah, that
if there was some group, then we should also copy them on this notice of violation.
Well, he was working with Parker River Clean Water Association, but they decided not to issue it, not to file a notice of intent because the low likelihood of it being approved and the cost and all that.
Right.
So he just continued to put dirt on the road.
So don't we need to try to ascertain where the jurisdiction does lie for this going forward? Or you feel like because of the wetland issues, it doesn't really matter who's in control of the trail?
Well, the city is in control of the property. It's city property.
Okay.
The state, I think all of the roadbed, I don't remember I have the diagram of the whole land transfer and everything. The state did keep control of part of it so they could have access for maintenance purposes. But most of this roadbed is city property, which is why we're trying to get parks involved to actually, so there's an actual city department taking care of it. And as far as, our jurisdiction, the Little River snakes underneath this in several spots. And it's just flat out, near it for a good portion of it too. So essentially the entire roadbed is most likely in our jurisdiction.
Okay.
And certainly some of the more damaged spots, like that first one near the overlook, is well within our jurisdiction. And I have
That's in the 25-foot no disturb zone.
Well, yeah, that's there too. So
Is the city paying him to do this work?
no, it's been his mission to do this. And he's been doing it for several years now.
Okay, I was just curious because if that was the case, I think that should be looked at.
Yeah, well, he was looking into having road sign, mile markers put on there with advertisements that Parker River Clean Water Association would benefit from. And that's obviously not going anywhere, but be that as it may.
He has done a lot of good work. I mean, on the other trails, keeping them open, mowing them.
Yeah.
Oh, absolutely.
So there's, I don't want to piss him off too much.
Well,
But I agree with what we're doing.
I think honestly, at this point, the other trails, all the other trails, like the Little River Trail, which is just off to the left of the bottom picture, goes off into the woods, as well as the ones way off to the right of that bottom picture. They're used so much now that they're staying open. So I don't know how much serious maintenance is needed out there anymore, but and Julie, we're looking into a company possibly maintaining trails and
Yeah,
farmland.
it's not going, I'm not really sure. I contacted this place called Land Stewardship Inc. That does open space management. But they emailed me back and we were having some correspondence. It looks like what they mostly do is contract work involving things like invasive species removal projects for municipality and like concrete beginning and end, like actual landscape work type projects, rather than this sort of more continuous maintenance thing that we need. So it's still, I think we still need to work on this.
Yeah, well, then basically what we need is parks, and
Yeah.
parks can coordinate, cleanup days and trail maintenance days.
I think that's what we need. I agree.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I guess if there's some issue as far as overseeing his work or doing something of that sort, the Conservation Commission does have funds that we've accumulated. I don't know if there might be some solution in that of sending out somebody.
That's a good point, David. I mean, maybe we just spend a certain amount annually on spring and fall sort of trail maintenance. A couple days in the spring, a couple days in the fall for someone to go out and work on these things.
Yeah, that's what our money's for. We can do that, but the reality is the mayor has told Jerry to stop working out there, and frankly, if we have to issue a notice of violation to him, I think the mayor should nullify the agreement with Parker River and not allow him out there anymore, because he is willingly defied the commission and has caused damage.
Yeah. Maybe we should talk with Lisa Reed again, Parks Department, and see what kind of funds they would want to have added to do an annual or twice annual, just trail maintenance, program. And see if
Or
we
even
can-
just coordinate with him, just so that you don't have to spend all your time, Joe, checking this all out.
Yeah, but by him you mean Jerry?
Yeah.
Yeah, I honestly don't even want Jerry out there anymore. I don't think it's worth it, because he does what he wants to do. He just goes and does it, and he doesn't check in with us.
Well, I don't think legally we can't stop him from going there, but we could try to put a stop to him doing work out there, right? I mean,
Well, that's true, but the mayor can stop him from going there.
you can.
Well, or at least, give him the guidance that we don't anymore, the city doesn't anymore need his services when it comes to trail maintenance, because it's sort of gone rogue.
Right.
Yeah. I think getting that point across is good.
Because that agreement with the mayor is all about trail maintenance. And
Yeah, which is a good idea. It was a great, and you're right, he has done fantastic work out there in certain areas. Just think that we need to have more control. Right, so I'll take that on. see if we can bring him in for a meeting.
Do we
I
need to
think
vote on that?
We'll need to vote on that. Yeah.
Okay, I'll make a motion to issue a letter of violation to Jerry Mullins.
Second,
All right. Roll call, Paul Healy,
yes.
Steve Moore,
Yes,
Dan Warshall,
Yes.
David Vine.
Yeah, I'd say not just Jerry Mullins, you know, his Parker River, the association. I didn't get a chance to say
Okay.
that as far as the motion.
Yep, he's
Um,
representing them, so that
Yeah,
makes,
yeah. And I say yes.
Carol Wagon,
Yes.
and I vote yes. Does anybody want to change their vote? Including Parker River? Okay. All right.
Joe, you want to talk briefly about Colby Farm and the pollinator we talked about the other day?
Why don't you talk about it? Because my brain's mush right now.
Hmm.
Okay, well, I'll keep this brief because it is getting late. What time is it? Oh, it's almost past my bedtime. I attended one of the sessions at the MAC annual conference, I don't know, whenever it was, a couple weeks ago. And one of them was about pollinator diversity. The guy was mostly concerned with bees, but for instance, but it was not only do you need to, if you want to take the case of the monarch butterflies, you know, they like their milkweed. That's only around a certain part of the year. You need stuff early in the spring, stuff late in the fall to maintain the insect populations that are the pollinators that you're trying to preserve. So the guy was a professor at UMass Dartmouth, and he's done a couple of projects down near there where he started these pollinator gardens and with flowers and shrubs and even some trees that enable it to have a food source for the pollinators. His main concern is bees. You know, all through the growing seasons. And I was thinking that out on Colby Farm, where all of that land that we either own now or will own very shortly, might be an opportunity to ask this guy to come up and perhaps start a small garden and see how it works. He's also working with a nursery to establish a seed mix that would you could spread over a field, and they would come up and you'd have a year-round supply, not year-round, growing season supply for pollinators, you know, butterflies, bees, whatever you have. So I don't know if that's something that we want to look into. I'd be willing to contact the guy and see what he says. It's kind of a haul for him to come up here from down there, but and maybe nothing will happen. But it's one of the things that we could do with that land that we own out there.
Isn't there a
Yeah.
small pollinator garden now part of the rail trail where it ends over by Parker Street?
Yes, yeah, Walt Thompson does that. But
But you're talking about a much bigger project.
oh, it could start, you know, as similar size and see how well it works. You know, and Walt's not a scientist, and you know, he plants and takes donations, and you know, for whatever people will give him, and there's no science behind it, which is fine. It's a very attractive garden, but there's science behind what this guy is doing.
I see. Thank
so
you.
Steve, are you thinking like sort of like a pilot project on our property where we would delineate it and have him plant within a certain zone and we can see watch?
Yeah, I mean, he might have his graduate students do the work.
I think it's a great idea. I don't know why we wouldn't do that. I think it's awesome.
Or at least check in with him and see what that might entail.
Yeah, I'll send him an email and see what he says. How many acres is that property? It's 20 or 30, isn't it?
That's a good question. I don't have that number. My brain's mush right now
Yeah.
too. I don't want to say the wrong
Well,
thing.
the back part is fairly good size. I was actually just thinking about the front part that the city had bought.
Right.
I can tell you
Okay.
in fairly short order, since I have all that marked out.
Okay. Yeah, let me know and I'll get in contact with him.
Well, in this day of virtual meetings, he may not need to come up here. Maybe he could just meet with us online and explain some of it anyway. Eventually, we'll probably need to get him up here, but that might work.
Yeah, his graduate students could have a whole playground up here. They could do whatever they want.
Yeah. We could keep him busy forever.
Mhm. You can send them to Evergreen for those pollinator meadows.
Before we go, I just want to revisit the notice of violation. One concern I have is that Jerry was rogue and he did not get permission from Parker River. And
Okay.
I would hate that if we are if we end up doing fines. I'm concerned that we could bankrupt a very small nonprofit. You know, if Jerry gets really intransigent about things, I am concerned about them, and I guess it's a conflict of interest to me because I've been working with them for a long time too. But I know that a lot of this stuff he didn't get permission from them to do.
Well, I was thinking, you know, we could send it to him, to Jerry, but just CC Parker River.
Okay.
You know, so, you know, since it's their property, you know, it's not really their property, but.
Well, and if when we have a hearing of some sort, if he claims that he was doing it under their auspices, then we would be in a different situation. But otherwise, you know, if you're saying that he was doing this all on his own, then there's no reason why we would have to pursue something against the other organization.
Yeah, because I know that they are, when I talked with the former president and one of the board members, he was terrified that fines would basically bankrupt them.
I'll just send it to Jerry and he can let us know whether or not he was doing this as part of his work with Parker River or on his own. Does that sound okay?
Mm-hmm. Well, he'll probably say Parker River, but I think there's documentation to the contrary.
Okay.
All right. We have anything else?
Motion to adjourn.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? All right.
Good night.
Good night, everyone.
Good night.